I also don't think that Jesus cares about what your church looks like.
I go to a non-denominational church that has really pretty stained glass, same pew structure. Like, it's, again, if you take Zoomer's logic and you go back to when the Presbyterian church sprouted up, it would have been invalid.
Tell just walking into a non-denominational church that it doesn't feel like a traditional church. All the different.
This is to your point, Creed, on architecture. This is a big point for Zoomer.
Yes, now we get into architecture, and we'll spend some time here. But it's like I don't disagree with him. Like, I do think that,
Yeah.
I think in the modern context, I think we've lost some beauty. I agree with you. I do think that building beautiful churches is always a good idea, but I also think that churches that are styled in a modern way can still be beautiful. Like, they don't have to be Renaissance churches to be beautiful. First of all, is the first thing I would say. I also don't think that Jesus cares about what your church looks like. I think that the Bible shows us that Jesus would not care what your church looked like. I mean, we know that the church in Colossae for a time literally just met in Philemon's house. Like, they just met in his house. So I just don't think it matters where you meet. It's about the people who are there. Now, it can be a good thing to make church architecture. I just don't think that there's any biblical standpoint for making really nice church architecture. It's more for us than it is for God. It's saying we want to make this really beautiful thing because we love God, and that's nice and all. But it's just unnecessary. My biggest point would be that it's not necessary. And my non-denominational church is still really nice when you walk into it. Like, it's a nice place to be. It's cozy. There's people that have, decorated it and made it nice. And I'm a little bit anti just like the converted black warehouse with LED lights. Like, I do think that's a little bit much. I used a specific picture in my video that I thought was kind of ridiculous. It was just like this empty white space, like hell itself, but with just wooden chairs and a stage. You know what I mean? Like, I agree that that's a little rough. Now, I don't think Jesus cares, but it's a little rough.
Yeah. It's definitely, like I said, I attend a non-denominational church, and my non-denominational church looks better than the example he pulled for the middle one for the average Protestant church. Like, I go to a non-denominational church that has really pretty stained glass, same pew structure. Like, it's really beautiful, actually, to go into my church. So yeah, it's not one.
Awesome.
One, and he knows that he put average, so that's maybe we're on the outskirts of the far more ugly non-denominational churches, because I've also been in those churches too, and they are really ugly and they do get boring.
There's definitely some.
But again, also, this word tradition is always funny, because when do you start that tradition? Do you start it when the church was super wealthy and could build all these churches, or do you go back further to when the church was started in like huts in Israel? Like, it's when does that tradition start?
It's exactly it. Yeah. No, so it's something that we came up with after the church was started. It was like after the fact, we got, probably not even until we got like funded by like the Rome, or like, until we were funded by Rome, I don't even know how we would have had enough money to make really big, beautiful churches. So somewhere around there, they decided it would be a good idea now that we have money, and that's great. But
I would just say
that. Like, you're gonna say something.
Yeah. I think I'm very pro. Like we're all agreeing. We're all very pro beautiful architecture. We love beautiful buildings. We want to support that. I think just practically, or I guess my point, because I do slightly agree with like Zoomer on this a little bit more. I'm at a church that currently they bought like an old it's like an office building, and they converted it to a church because they just needed a bigger building because the church is just growing. And it's not that it's not nice. It's a nice building. It's just that it's like an office building. Right. And so it's like, for me, it's like I am where I'm like, I don't know if it's just, I know it's probably personal preference, where it's like there are people who go to like the photo that Zoomer's using, where they go to places like this and they're like, oh, this is sick. I'm like, you know what? If you like that, that is great. That's completely great. For me, I think that there's a little bit more of I want to inspire the people going to the buildings to then be more artistic or to really see the beauty in creation throughout life as well, to try to keep Christians in the arts and in beauty. Because I think it's so often now that so many Christians are like, they just look at
This is a funny. I'm just saying we did talk about this, Chris. We did talk about it. Not every we both attend. Not Creed and I attend non-denominational churches that do not look like gay bars. So we agree.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that, I mean, we were talking about this with the last slide as well, when he was talking about music and stuff. I think a lot of Christians have kind of abandoned the arts a little bit. So for me, it would just be to try to push more so of that again, because that is something I'm starting to care more and more about.
Yep. I actually agree. I feel the same way. I do think that one of the valid critiques of non-denominationalism is the loss of tradition, and I agree. And that applies to traditional architecture, that applies to studying the church, studying and knowing church history. I agree. They don't do enough of any of that, and I think that's definitely one of the valid critiques. The question you have to then ask is, because you want a prettier church, should you compromise your theology and go to the Presbyterian church down the street? That's the question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would rather it be just that non-denominational churches just get organizations themselves so where they can help fund each other to make their buildings be more beautiful.
100%.
That would be probably better.
Yeah,
but
that'd be great.
then aren't you kind of, Seth, just
yeah, but I agree with
circumventing? Aren't you just making a denomination then?
Technically, yeah, but I agree. But like that, this is where I can say I'm not non-denominational, because I don't necessarily want to just keep my church separate from a denomination in of itself. I agree with Creed, where Creed was saying we can take these broken pieces of a glass or a window and make a whole new window.
Yeah, if you partner with a bunch of other churches,
Correct.
That's going to be the hard part. Just knowing church politics, that's going to be the hard part, is getting other churches to fund your building project. That's going to be a hard sell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
very true. But I mean, you have as much potential as getting the mainline denominations to work together. So I'd say the potential is equal.
True.
So,
True.
It's probably a better chance, honestly.
Yeah.
And then part of this, and Zoomer gets into this, well, I'll save that, because part of the resources thing is like a non-denominational church starting with little resources. You know, are they going to put the dollars that they get to nice windows versus investing into a community project? You know, it's
probably
like
not. Yeah,
probably not.
Yeah, no, you'd have to get to a point probably where they were more organized into several churches being part of like one distinct thing where there could be pools of money that are kind of designated around. I definitely think that's the case.
Yeah.
Different mainstream Christian denominations have tradition, even if they have different traditions, because they are all rooted in the early church and they are all organizationally descended from the early church.
Which so is non-denominational churches. They just are.
Yes, exactly. We're just another branch. That's exactly the argument you'd make. Yeah.
However, because all non-denominational churches sprouted up pretty recently, they are by definition not traditional.
But then if you take Zoomer's logic and you go back to when the Presbyterian church sprouted up, it would have been invalid.
I mean, so it depends.
Just because he was born today, he's against this argument. But like, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. That argument doesn't make any sense because it refutes all Protestant sprouts if you just go back further in history.
Yeah, because they're rooted in a tradition, but that tradition was totally different than what the tradition was at the time. So it's just now that's become tradition. And like the point I made is that my church will be rooted in tradition in 300 years if it's still standing. Then you can say it's rooted in tradition. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'd say we're still rooted in the early church. Again, we're just another splinter group from the early church. We're getting rid of the like dogma a little bit and wanting to just focus on the basics, but it's still a splinter. Like we believe, you know, in what Jesus taught and the disciples and the people who started the first church. And we believe still that we're, you know, proceed from the church that Christ started.
And I would agree with Zoomer. If a non-denominational church is rejecting all tradition, that's not good.
Yes.
They shouldn't be doing that. But 100%. If they are affirming that they are a branch, like we were talking about, of that tradition, then that is fine. And then they are like similar to the start of many other denominations.
Yes, and they shouldn't be exclusivist. They shouldn't say we are now the one true church. We are the only church. You know, we're
Yeah.
this new, reformed. Then you get like some of the Great Awakening churches, like LDS and stuff like that. That's like, we're now the true church. We've been given special
Mhm.
knowledge, and you have to come to our church, and all of tradition is wrong, essentially. So yeah, that's also a problem.
And tradition isn't just about aesthetics, it's also about beliefs. Most non-denominational churches don't talk about the church fathers, don't use the creeds of the early church, and don't care a lot about the sacraments. Most non-denominational churches don't have these traditional elements of Christianity. A big reason non-denominational
I agree with that.
I would agree with that too.
I would maybe disagree a little bit on sacraments, because it just depends on what height of view you hold on the sacraments. But on the other stuff, yes, they don't teach the church service or the church fathers. They don't care about tradition enough. They don't teach tradition enough, and I agree that that's a problem, like 100%.
Yep.
National churches usually don't have beautiful traditional buildings and music is because they don't have the resources. Mainline churches are large organizations that have tons of resources that they have stored up over the years, with generations and generations of people donating to them. But non-denominational churches always have to start from scratch. And by the way, resources doesn't just mean money. Resources also includes property, universities, summer camps, media publications, and libraries. The Bible says the church needs to share all of its resources. That's why non-denominationalism is unbiblical, because
This argument doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because this argument
agree.
is also a mandate for denominations to share the resources
100%. Yes.
with
for
each
them,
other. Like, it applies to them.
Yes. Yes. So Redeemed Zoomer should give some of his Presbyterian money to my non-denominational church, and then we'll make our building more beautiful. And then maybe he'd be okay
Yeah.
with it.
There you go.
Yeah. And also,
Yeah, no, this is a bad
Redeem
argument.
Zoomer has made the argument that the Presbyterian Church, unless it's reformed, is dying out. So this isn't always going to be the case. And so,
100%.
is there a certain point in the resource management or mismanagement where the Presbyterian Church dies off enough, and all of a sudden they don't become a valid church anymore because they're dying? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yep. I agree that it's a shame for resources to go to waste or to not have resources. It would be better if we did have resources, but you're back to the exact same question, which is, you want a beautiful building or you want resources. At what point do you compromise on your theology to get access to those things? And that's the question.
Because it prevents churches from having enough resources. Why does it matter for the church to possess these things? So the church can have an impact on the world. For starters, many of the most influential universities were founded by Bible-believing Christians, but it was always by established Christian denominations. Non-denominationals have never founded a highly rated university. Wait, but what about my Bible college? I said a highly rated university. Also, Christians have historically obeyed.
I don't really disagree with this point. He's technically accurate that non-denominationals haven't started a highly credible university.
Sure.
To Creed's point, though, previously, who really cares in the grand scheme? Like, does this get you any closer to proving that the non-denominational church is invalid? I don't really think so.
And his examples here are Princeton. Nobody's learning about Jesus at Princeton. In fact, they're being led so far away from Jesus at Princeton that they might never meet him ever. And the same thing is true of Yale and Duke and Harvard and any other institution that's been founded on religious structure. It's just so deserted from that now. And frankly, only the fundamentalist evangelical universities are the ones that even teach doctrine anymore. So
Right.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about this. And also, if you want the non-denominationals to have enough money so that they can start colleges now, like, is that really do we really need more colleges? Is that what we need? There's a college in every city. You can't drive an hour without hitting a college that offers a 4-year degree. Like, I don't know. That's just another thing that I'm not so sure about.
It's actually funny that he brings up colleges as an example, because I'm currently at a Southern Baptist college, and they're growing at such a rate that they're running out of dorm space.
Oh yeah.
So they're seeing the impact start to actually come in, and they're part of a denomination that he hates, or not anymore. I guess he likes
He's
Baptists,
okay with the Baptists. He doesn't agree with them,
Yeah.
but he thinks
No.
they're kind of cool. Aside from they also don't build nice buildings and stuff like that.
Actually, dude, he had a new video on Baptist though, where he was like, I visited a cool Baptist church and it looks cool, so I like it. And I'm like,
Yes.
bro, what?
That's if you get him into one non-denominational church that was built in an old building, I think he might like it like 10 times
Josh,
better.
you gotta invite him
Right.
out to yours.
That's what I was gonna
You gotta
say.
get him
Yeah,
out
because
there.
mine.
Yeah,
is
you
a
said
nice old
stained glass
building.
windows. I think
Yeah.
we might be able to
He'd be
convert
sold.
him to non-denominationalism if he
I
goes
literally- no,
into a
I'm not even
stained glass
kidding.
window church.
I posted the photo of my church's stained glass to Redeem Zoomer, and I tagged him in it. I was like, "Hey, rank my non-denominational church's building," and he even
Yeah.
said, "Like, it actually is pretty nice. I don't like your worship, but it's really a nice building."
Oh yeah.
Chris said, "Non-denominational, not biblical," referring to Redeem Zoomer in Luke chapter 9.
Yes.
Master,
This is
said
great.
John, we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he does not accompany us. And then in 50, in the reply, do not stop him. Creed, are you aware with this?
Yes, he says,
Anything to
do
say to
not
that?
stop him because whoever is not against us is for us. And that's where we get that expression from.
There you
And
go.
so, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And like I said, it's not our job to figure out who the false professors of Christ are. That's his responsibility. That's why all the churches should work together. As far as, I mean, if it gets to the point where you can identify, this is what Paul talks about. Like if you see them sinning, then they're obviously confessing with their mouth, but not acting in a way that is in accordance. Then that's an example. But as far as you could tell, a church is professing Jesus Christ, then you're on the same side, and you can act as if you are. You should not stop them from doing what they're doing. So 100%, that's a great verse.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Obeyed Jesus' command to heal the sick by building the best hospitals in the world. There's tons of Catholic and Presbyterian hospitals. There's a reason so many hospitals have the word saint in the name, but are there any non-denominational hospitals? Now, all this being said,
I'm sure that there are examples that we could bring today of non-denominationalism having a broader impact in culture than the Presbyterian Church.
I guarantee it. Very true.
I guarantee it.
Yes.
That's
And
a
the
hard
point I
argument
say-
to make.
Yeah. And also the hospital thing. First of all, there's two things there. The hospital thing, like I said, I mean, if I today get enough resources and build my non-denominational hospital right down the road from our Catholic hospital, nobody's going to come because there's already a Catholic hospital and it's been there for years. And that's the case everywhere here. So unless you're talking about building hospitals abroad in countries that don't have medical care, then it's not applicable to reconquering the United States. The second thing is the verse that he uses there, what I'm assuming the verse is referencing when he says Jesus says to heal the sick. That's, as far as I'm aware, that's only used on the occasions where Jesus is telling the apostles to go out and perform miracles. He's talking about miraculously healing the sick as a sign to them. He's not saying heal the sick forever and perpetually. That's the duty of the Christian church, is to invent medicine and heal the sick. Like, I don't think that necessarily applies. It's a good thing. He definitely says help people, help your neighbor, love one another. 100%, it's a good thing to start hospitals, but I don't think using that command is accurate.
Yeah, I think Zoomer is probably really high on like the general grace of God that just applies to literally everyone, whether you're believing or not, and it doesn't have to be gospel related. And Christians should be very active in the general grace of God, of spreading the general grace of God, of like being for the net benefit and good of society. That doesn't necessarily equate their spiritual good or the spread of the gospel, which maybe a non-denominational or someone of a Baptist more leaning may have that preference. In their impact of culture is going to be more strictly aligned with gospel related stuff. And so we do see that with like, Christian movies, which some of them end up being cringe because they don't do the necessary.
Most Christian movies are made for Christians, and they're not made for anybody else.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And so
yes,
I think some of the best Christian movies that are made are ones that are made for wide audiences that still preach a true Christian message. Like
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings is a great example, but the Passion of the Christ is literally
that's a great
the story of Christ, but it has a broad appeal because it's just a really good movie.
Yes, it's well
it
made.
seems
It's got
like-
good resources, and yeah,
Yeah, and it seems like Zoomer would be fine with like Christians just making a movie about anything, and it's like, okay, I mean, okay, it's like that.
I wonder.
I want that to happen, but also it's not. I don't know if it's the best thing that Christians should be focused on.
yeah, I agree.
Josh and I, we came down pretty hard on PFU for being a social Christian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if Zoomer would be like way more sympathetic towards that 'cause they're still doing like the acts of God or the net positive of Christendom, but they're just throwing out all belief of Christ with it.
that's a great
They're
question.
just taking the pragmatic side of it,
Yep.
and they're leaving everything else.
Yep. I'd love to ask him that question. Like, is it more valuable that Jordan Peterson is reading the Bible to everybody, but not teaching them the truth about Christ necessarily? Like, that's a good question. Maybe.
Yeah.
I can guarantee that there have been people who have converted to Christianity because of Jordan Peterson. 100%. That's the case. But then, yeah, but it's still worth the question. We don't know for sure if Jordan Peterson is a Christian. It's looking like not yet or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
what do you mean by Christian?
What do you mean by belief? And what do you mean by God?
Yeah.
Oh, bro.
Listen, I love Jordan Peterson. I do. I like him. I like him a lot. I think he's he's right about a lot of things, but he's definitely appropriating cultural Christianity. It's just definitely. I actually did a video on the same topic that you guys did.
Oh, good. Yeah. No, I did. It's probably not good, but I do have a detest for culture